Well, it's time for another gardening week, and of course there's not much gardening going on at the moment. The pigeons, though, have taken a fancy to my purple sprouting broccoli, so I've put this net on. It's actually a fleece called Envirotect, so it will give these some protection against the worst of the winter weather. And what I've done is I've just kind of put some fence pins in the corners of the beds, just kind of looped the net around them and just fastened them with a clip. So that seems to be pretty good. And then over there I've done the same with my colettes. So these are the colettes that I'm going to leave in the beds the longest. I want to keep these sprout tops for spring. I'll leave that one just sacrificial for the pigeons, and we've got a few others scattered around which we'll leave as well. But this will be, this will give us a huge harvest in spring. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to leave the Brussels sprouts to the pigeons because the sprout tops are pretty small and feeble. I don't think I'm going to lose out very much. And really I just want the sprouts on the stems, and the pigeons don't generally bother about those. So yeah, I try to make sure the pigeons have got a little bit to eat and the other birds, but got to keep some for me as well. I thought I'd just quickly show you some of the new plantings and how they fared during that really cold snap. I think the coldest it got here was down to about -7 degrees. It was -3.5 degrees last night, and obviously it's still frozen now. And everything's looking pretty good. All these little cabbages and the early Brussels sprouts, they're looking okay. We'll just have a quick look at those cauliflowers. They're looking a bit sad for themselves, but they're not looking too bad. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with them. Again, as I say, it was -3.5 last night, so they obviously were frozen, so they're a little bit floppy. The ground underneath these low tunnels now has defrosted, and so I'm going to do a little bit of planting. But before I do, I just want to show you those little tiny spinach that I planted, I think maybe 2-3 weeks ago. And they're looking really nice. I think can't see any slug damage on any of those. Yeah, they've all settled in really nicely, and not really been bothered by the frost at all. And that is always a slight worry, because I have found in the past that spinach, when you plant it out just before a really fierce sort of frost period, can kind of stunt its growth a bit. But no, it all looks fine to me. So this is the last frosty day, and it's warming up from now on. So I'm just going to leave all the beds on their vented setting, and they should be pretty happy. And then these are the lettuces that we put in between the carrots, and most of those are looking pretty good as well. I haven't had any definite losses to the slugs and snails, and yeah, pretty happy with the quality of those. And so this is the bed where we took that radicchio out in that area, and some scrappy lettuces out of there, and some scrappy lettuces out of there as well. And popped a few slug pellets in, just looking for problems. Very few problems. There's only probably 2 or 3 slugs or something in this bed. And it froze last night, but it's kind of breaking up now. Ideally, I do want to get this planted, because the lettuce that wasn't ready for planting out last week is ready for planting out now. And we're just in for a very long sort of period now of mildish weather. And the lettuces, as I say, are ready to go out. So I think I'm going to try and get them planted, and hope for the best. So I've got all the holes dibbed. I'm just going to wait for it to warm up a little bit more before I actually do the planting. So I'm just going to close this up a little bit, just for another hour, while I do a few other jobs. And that means we can see this spinach that we put in last week. And again, it all looks pretty well established. Really happy with it. So yeah, carrots are looking good, still nice and firm. I don't think there's been any frost damage underneath this coal frame. I think they're all going to be just fine. So yeah, I think I've weathered the storm pretty well. So because these cauliflowers did so well, I'm going to put the other 4 cauliflowers in that I've got ready to go. And I'm also going to take home all of my spares, because the weather's such now, as I say, over the next couple of weeks, that it doesn't look like I'm going to be down on the allotment very much. I haven't got very much to do, so I won't be able to keep an eye on them. I'd rather have them in the greenhouse where I can keep them, well, just keep an eye on them. Somebody was asking me, you know, what's the spacing for cauliflowers? It does sort of depend on the time of year, but at this time of year, you can do 4 or 5 per metre squared. These beds are just over a metre squared. You could put one in the middle here. I found the one in the middle will only be about cricket ball size though, so I'm just not going to bother. I'd rather use that 5th plant and put it somewhere where it can grow to full size rather than squeeze it in. And this ground, unlike the coal frame, is all nicely defrosted, and that just demonstrates the slight benefit from a low tunnel rather than a coal frame. It does just warm up that little bit sooner. And you know, I watched a YouTube video. I don't watch many YouTube videos, but I watched one from the US, and there was a guy who was comparing inside and outside temperatures in a low tunnel and outside, and he was saying that you know, he was surprised that the temperature inside his low tunnels was actually lower than the temperature outside. I'm not surprised about that, because there's no wind, and you know, there is a little bit of sort of energy in the air when it's moving, and so outside does tend to be a tiny bit warmer than under a low tunnel. You know, the minimum temperature at night, obviously it'll be warmer when the sun's shining and in sort of early evening when there's still a little bit of heat being given off from the soil. But yeah, I'm not surprised. But the main benefit, I think, of growing under plastic is there's effectively zero wind chill, and that does make a difference, I think, because you know, wind chill can be pretty severe, and not only is it sort of cold, well, it's not strictly speaking colder, but the effective temperature is less, but also it's very dehydrating, and yeah, plants really don't get on very well with very low wind chills. So I don't mind planting things out when it's cold, provided they've got that extra little bit of protection, as I say, not from the cold but from the wind chill. Nice roots on these. After my experiences last year with things not having any roots, it's always a really nice, not surprise, but nice feeling when I see a nice root ball. So they're looking happy in there. I don't know whether I can give them any water. I don't know whether I've got any water that's not frozen. They probably don't need it. So I've got a really nice little selection of lettuces here. I'll just put them up on the side of the screen so you can see what they are, all the different varieties that I've got. And I won't be planting them all out, because obviously there's a few little ones like these that are still a bit too small. I've always found it really amazing, you know, how well lettuce does planted out in such sort of harsh conditions, and yeah, it just seems to do fine. And obviously I could just leave these somewhere where it's fairly bright and fairly cool, and they'll basically just go into kind of suspended animation for a while. And I could plant them out in January if I wanted to. I don't know, I just don't like having empty beds, and I just find that they kind of just put roots down, so although they don't grow much in the way of leaf, they do just get nicely established, and they do get off to a really fast start then when we come to February. So yeah, it's just my bias, I just really like to have plants in the soil. So I'm really happy with these. Most of these actually sell on overtypes, which I'm testing to see how well they do over winter, but I've also got some Lola Rossa and some Canasta and some other bits and pieces in here, and so I've got some over there in that bed in between the carrots. These should be ready sort of towards the end of March, I should think, and they'll go through until maybe the middle of May, and that's when the carrots will go into this bed. But these aren't the only lettuces I'll be sowing. I'll be sowing some more in January, some more in February, so we have a nice continuous supply, and some of those will just be reserves just in case this early sowing goes wrong. But yeah, it'll be really nice to have these spring varieties rather than just my overwintered ones. And I've got this bed spare. This is probably where I'll probably maybe put a mix here of spinach and lettuce. Probably some of the ones I sow in December, or some of the ones I sow in January. And then down there, got a bit of a problem with pigeons. So as I mentioned earlier on in the video, I did net these beds. These are the really nice beds of purple sprouting broccoli. This one is the kind of one that's got club root, and I wasn't really sure whether I wanted to keep it or not keep it, so I just left it uncovered. And the pigeons have really gone at this one, so I think I'll just leave it for the pigeons until maybe February time. And then what I'll do is I'll take one of the cold frame tops off one of these beds, just pop it on here, and and then I'll have another bed to plant for a spring harvest, so yeah, it won't be wasted.